I was gonna make some grand argument today about how different mediums of art connect with each other and affect each other, what this interplay of different mediums means. But I just had more hand surgery, and I found out what it feels like to have metal scraping the inside of your bone on its way out, and spoiler alert, you hear it in your skull. So today is Vibe Day. No thesis, just vibes. Album covers were not always an essential part of the listening experience. In fact, album covers were not always. Albums themselves only came around due to a series of mainly technological innovations. In the early days of vinyl, they could only hold about 3 minutes of audio, and by 1924, artists still had to greatly condense their works to, at that time, about 4 or 5 minutes allocated to them. While in Europe, by 1910, you already had complete operas transcribed onto sets of vinyl discs, which you could count as the first album. The album as we know it didn't come around until much later. The standard 12-inch LP as we know it today didn't come out until around 1948, and before that it was more or less common practice to just put the vinyls in whatever held them, be it paper, cardboard, or any other material. The earliest known album cover came around due to Columbia Records' new director of art, Alex Steinweiss, who designed the first album art in 1939. This led to a meteoric rise in sales, with Columbia's newly arted version of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony rising 895% in sales. In summary, they didn't do it, then it made money, now they do. But a more interesting question is, what are album covers capable of? When we remove commercial means, what can they do? What are album covers? My father once told me that the ideal way to listen to an album is to sit and stare at the album cover while you do it, taking it in, letting the colors imbue more meaning into you, and seeing it as part of the listening experience. An album cover is not just some throwaway piece of trash. It is, at the very least, an important companion piece to the work, if not quintessential to the very meaning of it. It's art. An album cover is usually the first piece of interaction a listener has with an album, whether it be at the store or on a digital marketplace. Thus, the album sets the expectations and main ideas from the get-go for the entire record. When you look at each of these covers, you get very different feelings, but you definitely feel something. You already have an idea of what this means, of what you're going to be hearing. Meliora is a pretty sick metal record by the former courtroom drama known as Ghost. It deals with a bunch of things like the occult, God, religion, and other ideas throughout its 41 minutes, and that's cool. But it is enhanced incalculably by the album cover. It immediately relays this grandeur of something beyond your comprehension, something that just witnessing it would break your feeble mind like Cthulhu shredding on an electric guitar. Simultaneously, it immediately emanates this dark religiosity about it, which is incredibly relevant to the album's themes of false prophets. It feels like a Venn diagram of famously evil characters like the Emperor from the Star Wars or the Pope from the Italy. As you stare at it, it mixes with the music and you start to notice more and more elements, from the lights at the top and the bottom of the frame to the gothic skylines adorning the sides, and hey, you may even notice that not only is there a secret face, inside the secret face, there's another secret dude. I love it! Thus, an album cover should do 3 main things. 1. Be interesting. This doesn't mean it has to be cluttered or anything. Minimalism and maximalism are both valid forms of expression. Rather, it should be resonant, it should be evocative. I want to look at it and immediately have thoughts. Oh damn, I'm thinking! 2. Be relevant. It should relate directly to the record, not just be a piece of promotional art that could tie in with literally anything. This relation can be literal, vibes-based, a statement, or any combination of those 3. But it should be related to the record. 3. Enhance. A good album cover can be interesting, it can be relevant, but above all, it needs to enhance and converse with the work it's relating to. I want a Gesamtkunstwerk. I want something that is greater than the sum of its parts and works best when put together. Have all those and hey, you might be a good album cover. Vibe 3. Album art analysis. CD cover critique. Final veil valuing. LP. In my experience, you can categorize album covers into two main categories, good and bad. But that's a little reductive. So instead, I have a system of 5 totally not arbitrary categories designed to separate album covers based on their functional design element. The fixed system, which stands for face, icon, character, typography, scenario. If you wish to remember this, simply recall fluorescein isothiocyanate, the best chemical compound. Probably the clearest trend one can notice in album covers is just putting a plain old face on the background. Or maybe not so plain a face. Or maybe not even immediately registering as a face. And thus, we have the face category. It's a close-up of varying degrees of closeness on a face. It can be human or non-human, live action or drawn, clear or abstract. It just has to center around the idea of a face. This works on one level already, as it plays into what's called Pareidolia, or the human tendency to look for faces. We are naturally inclined to try and find a face. On another level, a face is something with a certain level of familiarity and rules and expectations. We expect a certain level of symmetry. We know what different expressions mean. And by going with or against any of these topics or ideas, an album cover can already start saying something. On a third level, a face is intimate. It is a direct connection with the subject. When we see a face, it allows for a radical, simple empathy. A bridge directly between the listener and the ideas of the record. Damn by Kendrick Lamar immediately puts you at eye level with Kendrick. This album is unflinchingly introspective, and he maintains direct eye contact with the viewer, even as giant bold letters overtake the top fifth of the screen. And through this unflinching look, by the end of the record, Kendrick is able to reinforce his confidence in who he is. Partly. On the diametric opposite of Damn, we have Blonde by Frank Ocean. Frank is covering his face, he averts his gaze. This album is raw and emotional and naked, and we get this feeling that the artist, in averting his gaze, is claustrophobic and unsure of himself, and this tension remains throughout the project. A personal all-time favorite of mine, and obvious choice, is In the Court of the Crimson King, a favorite of any 20-something white stoner who once tried to learn electric guitar but gave up because bar chords hurt their fingers. The cover has 2 sides, each depicting a titular character from one of the songs in the album. On the iconic front side, we have the 21st century schizoid man, a dark reflection of the future, whose mental state has been completely warped by the horrors of the 20th century, from Vietnam to the atomic bomb. The art reflects this, forming a face that, while clearly human, is contorted and malformed into horrible, inhuman terror. The beautiful reds, purples, and blues are maintained on the other side, depicting what is in fact not some kind of evil trickster egg, but the Crimson King, a devil-like entity whose realm humanity is now entering. The fluid coloring also reflects the progressive escalating song structure and the ideas of the dissolution of humanity and chaos that are presented throughout the record. It is interesting, it is relevant, and it is in hands full. It's great. The icon artwork revolves around some kind of symbol, be it living or inanimate. Similarly to the face, we have a recognizable design that is taking center stage. But unlike the face, it doesn't have to be a face, so it can vary much more in pose and shape and other things. The icon artwork is the type of artwork you would see turned into pendants and t-shirts and tattoos and other paraphernalia. Where the face is empathetic and plays on some kind of emotional connection the viewer has to the idea of a face, the symbol is something much grander. It is the distillation of the concept of a project into a single visual. Simply put, it's iconic. The Velvet Underground and Nico and the Dark Side of the Moon are 2 of the most iconic designs ever put to music, each coming with its own sort of statement. While the latter has many interpretations, to me it's always seemed like the mind of someone who is considered by society a lunatic. While the people treating them may see a jarbled mess of colors, to them it's a thought coming in and a technicolor array of responses coming out. It makes perfect sense. The former is metatextual. It dissects the world around it, and through Andy Warhol's pop art sensibilities is able to dissect the idea of an album cover, giving you such powerful and immense music that a banana is transformed into one of the most iconic images ever. It doesn't have to be an object though. Tusk by Fleetwood Mac neatly fits into this category. The angry dog on the front relays to the listener the dusty, lonesome yet raging feeling of this entire project. The dog doesn't distill a concept or idea, it distills emotion. It concentrates the entire LP's fury and fright into a single decontextualized moment. For a more human example, Swans! Says To Be Kind cover. The baby face epitomizes the condensation process that characterizes the Icon album cover. On a literal level, the album describes many ideas of birth, infancy, parenthood, all of which tie in with the baby. On a more figurative level, the baby symbolizes the feelings of this record. It's dark and violently emotional, and much like a real crying baby, not entirely within our comprehension. We understand the emotion, but we don't always know how to address it. On a musical level, this album sounds like a crying baby. It's so good. Michael Gira, the mind behind Swans, has even said that the label Young God, quote, always chose a strong, sensual, or iconic image for an album cover. I'd say that's pretty iconic. A character cover centers around someone who is a known nameable quantity. This can be a famous person, a character from the story of the record, or the artist themselves. The defining feature here is knowledge of who the character is. This is because the character cover's central function is to contextualize the record through those that made it, inhabit it, or inspired it. Many records just have the artist on the front, like Red by Taylor Swift, or Red by King Crimson, or Red by Taylor Swift. This is where a lot of the Tyler the Creator and David Bowie discographies are, because they base a lot of their albums on characters. Igor is starkly saturated in the cover of Igor, which feels venomously saccharine. It's like a cross between a rattlesnake and a jelly bean. And Igor is just as much out of place on the candy pink cover as he is in the rest of the story. Aladdin Sane's look transcends the album cover and, frankly, the album itself. Here both music and album cover radiate this electric Americana, which is very fitting for an album described as Ziggy Goes to America. And that red streak. Need I say more? The de facto choice here, if maybe by sheer ubiquity alone, is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The collage of pop culture icons in the background looks like what would happen if you took every single one of the tracks in the album, layered them on top of each other, and put the result in a spectrogram. The line here between characters and people is blurred. We see John, Paul, John, and Ringo, but they are also the players in the fictional Sargent's band, and the array of their inspirations and experiences in the background are just as much members as they are. This way, the album art reflects the soft concept of the record, i.e. the hazy distinction between the Beatles themselves and the Sargent's band. Finally, it's our knowledge of the Beatles and the pop icon library behind them that contextualizes this record as a kind of group photo for a fictional band. Context through characters makes this sleeve indicative of the music that accompanies it. You know what? Fuck faces, objects, and things. All my homies hate faces, objects, and things. I use words. I want my art to reflect that. Therefore, I present to you the typography-based cover. The typography-based album cover it's just really cool and versatile. You can have it in big fuck-off letters like on Pure Heroin, or you can stick it in the corner like on Untitled Unmastered. You can have it be rigid and act as a misdirection like on Sunbather, or you can have it be all circly and look exactly like it sounds like on Close to the Edge. Talking Heads 1977 is just a truly sickening combination of colors that fits the vibe so perfectly. And Beyonce's self-titled album uses its simplistic nature to channel the fact that all you need to know is that right now, you're listening to Beyonce. As much as my mind begs me to talk about the White Album, not that one, yeah, I can't pick the Beatles twice. So instead, I'm going with In Rainbows. Yeah, I'm not exactly being original. This image not only captures this album perfectly, but also the entire Radiohead ethos. It's a cold, dark blackness that also has within it this warm, molten orange. It's familiar, conceivably human even, yet so unlike anything else. It's futuristic, something of the space age, yet it feels primordial, like it came before time itself. The dichotomy reflects a lack of autonomy and the slack yet not laid back monotony of a motif. The pièce de résistance is the iconic typography. Its varying symbols and colors are hypnotic, leading your gaze from the top to the bottom. And the font. Ah! I love this font. There's something about this font that I cannot flowery language my way around. It's just perfect in a way that only a typography cover can be. It's beyond words to describe. It simply fits. Lastly, some album covers work as a short story of their own. An event, a situation, a moment in time, a scene. When an album cover depicts any of these things, it falls under the scenario category. A scenario album's main functionality is to set the vibe. In depicting a sort of reality, it immediately connects to the brain's vibe center. This or that scenario cover may not involve us directly, but it depicts a reality that could conceivably exist alongside us, triggering our need for comprehension. A scenario cover's contents can range from a quiet, quaint portrayal of teenage gayness to apocalyptic in scale and imagery. Pink Floyd tells you the entire story in a single handshake with the devil on Wish You're Here, while painting a late capitalist dystopian still life of a factory on animals. Buena Vista Social Club captures the dry tropical feeling of a Cuban cityscape from street level, delivering the exact state of mind for their laid-back proletariat jazz, while 1000 Gags is just vaguely antisocial and adored by me. It's amazing. I love it. Mike Kroll's Power Cut is colored in an iconic combo of cyan, pink, and cream that is so idiosyncratic it will make Wes Anderson blush. We have a guy on a bed, at the end of the day, bruised and beaten and turning to a guitar for his release. This informs listeners from the get-go that this project is brash, emotionally potent, and purposely teetering on the line between self-aware and whiny. But Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly, beyond being Kendrick's best project, is also the obvious choice here. This triumphant black and white portrait immediately tells it all. Race in America, corrupted politics, possible solutions to some of those problems, the solidarity and internal struggles of the black community, and the dismantling of all of these ideas that is the record. A depiction of the wretched of the earth overrunning the center of power that pushes them into slums through cooperation. Strength in numbers allows for a rendering of a monochromatic fantasy that is as hindered as it is idyllic. Yet the album itself does nothing if not present a call to arms to Kendrick's audience to bring about change. I also see it as a bit of a literal understanding of what was metaphorically alluded to in Mortal Man by Tupac. The ground is gonna open up and swallow the evil. That's how I see it. My word is bond. And the ground is a symbol for the poor people. The poor people is gonna open up this whole world and swallow up the rich people. Oh, that's it. Man, I just wanted to talk about some of my favorite album covers. But, alas, my endless craving for categorization could not be satiated! Thus, I have presented you with my system, and hopefully, you don't have any critical thinking, so you will simply regurgitate everything I said every time you talk about this, cementing my legacy forever as that guy who made that video that was neat. Every time you see an album cover, you will think of me. There are of course outliers to everything I said, whether it be indecisive little bitches who eat everything at the buffet and then just feel bloated and cry about it, or unique little bitches who simply refuse succinct categorization. If you're trying to figure out what category an album falls into and you're not sure, try to think what element cannot be removed. What is the most essential part of the album? This is called the t-shirt metric. It's called that because it's the part of the album cover that would be on a low-cost, shitty t-shirt. More than anything though, I want you to pay attention to album covers. I want you to recognize them as pieces of art that merit attention and discussion in relation or out of relation to their respective project. Celebrate, commend, and critique album covers where they merit it, and do not be lenient on the forgettable and the mundane. Enjoy every art form to its fullest. Back to the vibes. I am done, I am done, I am done, done. Oh shit. What are album covers? That's an echo. C'est magnifique, j'adore. I'm not getting a lot of blood to my brain. The icon address. Crimson King. That's terrible. Oh, I can't do that.
Honor means family. And family means nobody gets left behind.
An album cover is not just some my father. I'm becoming cinefix. Am I advocating for something illegal? Oops! Okay, I'm gonna